The kick wasn't what broke me. It was the laughter that came after. I can still feel the exact spot where his boot connected with my ribs, 3 inches below my left breast, right where the bone curves. But the physical pain faded in minutes. What didn't fade was the sound of 11 grown men laughing as I lay on the garage floor, motor oil soaking through my shirt, my husband standing over me like he'd just won something. "Get up, Margot," he said, not even looking at me, already turning back to his friends. "And bring us more beer while you're at it." I was 34 years old, a certified public accountant with my own firm, a woman who'd built a life from nothing after growing up in foster care. And there I was, on cold concrete in my own garage, listening to my husband of 7 years tell his poker buddies how I needed to learn my place. Brad Hutchinson was a 6'3", 220 pounds former high school quarterback who never made it to college ball. He worked construction, made decent money, and somewhere in the last 2 years had decided that wasn't enough. That he needed more. Not more money or success, more power, more control, more ways to feel like the big man he'd been at 17. The poker game was every Saturday. Started innocent enough. A few guys from his work, a couple beers, $50 buy-ins. But it had evolved into something else. Something darker. They'd sit in our garage from noon to midnight, and I was expected to serve them. Bring drinks. Make food. Clean up. Stay quiet. Brad called it being a good hostess. I called it the beginning of the end. That Saturday in October, I'd made a mistake. I'd asked them to keep it down because I had a client call scheduled. Brad's friend Tony had made some comment about who wore the pants, and Brad had to prove it was him. So when I came out to the garage to bring the sandwiches they demanded, Brad stood up, said something about teaching me proper respect, and kicked me. Not hard enough to break anything, he was careful about that, but hard enough to knock me down. Hard enough to make a point. The 11 men around that poker table included 3 cops, 2 city councilmen, a judge, and 5 business owners who controlled half the construction contracts in Fort Collins, Colorado. They all laughed. Judge Morrison actually clapped. Officer Danny Reeves filmed it on his phone. I got up slowly, my left side screaming, oil staining my favorite white blouse. I looked at each of their faces, memorizing their expressions. Brad's triumphant smirk. Tony's hyena laughs. The judge's amused approval. Danny is still recording, probably for their group chat. They thought they were untouchable. Powerful men in a small city, protecting each other, enabling each other, building their own little kingdom where women like me existed only to serve. I went inside, got them their beer, and served it with a smile. Then I went in my office, locked the door, and started planning how I was going to destroy every single one of them. Not just Brad, that would be too simple. All of them. The whole poisonous network that made him feel safe enough to kick his wife in front of witnesses. 3 months later, 10 of those 11 men would be in prison or facing criminal charges. The 11th would be in intensive care, though not from anything I did directly. Brad would lose everything: his job, his friends, his reputation, his freedom, and most importantly, his belief that he could hurt me without consequences. But that night, standing in my office with motor oil drying on my clothes and a bruise spreading across my ribs, I didn't know how yet. I just knew that Brad Hutchinson had made the worst mistake of his life. He'd confused silence with weakness. He'd mistaken patience for submission. And he'd forgotten the most important rule of marriage: never underestimate the person who does your taxes, knows all your passwords, and has been documenting everything for years. He thought that kick would keep me down. Instead, it set me free. Free to stop pretending our marriage could be saved. Free to stop protecting him from himself. And free to become the kind of woman who could dismantle a dozen lives with nothing but a laptop, a recording app, and the fury of someone who'd been kicked one too many times. Before I tell you how I destroyed my husband and his entire circle, you need to understand who I was before that kick. I wasn't always the kind of woman who could orchestrate something like this. That woman was forged in increments, shaped by 1,000 small surrenders I'd made trying to save a marriage that was already dead. My name is Margot Hutchinson, née Sullivan. I grew up in the Colorado foster system, bounced between 7 homes from age 8 to 18. You learn things in foster care: how to read a room instantly, how to make yourself useful so they keep you around, how to hide anything valuable because it will disappear otherwise. Those skills made me a survivor, but they also made me a target for men like Brad who could smell damage like blood in the water. I met Brad when I was 27, fresh out of getting my CPA license, working 60-hour weeks at a firm in downtown Denver. He was doing construction on the building next door and would whistle when I walked by in my suits. I thought it was annoying until the day he brought me coffee instead. Perfect order he'd memorized from watching me. Should have been a red flag, that level of attention before we'd even spoken. But I was lonely, working constantly, and he was handsome in that rough way that made me feel like someone could protect me for once. Our dating phase was intense. Brad love-bombed me before I knew that term existed. Flowers at my office daily. Surprise trips to Vail. Meeting his entire family within 3 weeks. He proposed after 6 months and married me after 8. My foster care background meant I had no family to slow things down, ask questions, and notice the warning signs. His family loved that about me. No interference, no competing loyalties. The first 2 years were good, or I thought they were. Brad was attentive, supportive of my career, proud when I opened my own accounting firm. Sullivan Financial Services started in a tiny office in Fort Collins, just me and one assistant. Within 3 years, I had 6 employees and contracts with half the small businesses in town. I was good at what I did, finding money people didn't know they had, saving companies from bankruptcy, turning chaos into order. But as my success grew, Brad changed. Or maybe he just stopped pretending. Started making comments about how my success made him look bad. How his construction buddies gave him grief about his wife making more money. How I needed to be more supportive, more traditional, more like his mother who'd raised 5 kids and never worked a day outside the home. The poker game started in year 5 of our marriage. Just guys being guys, he said. I was fine with it initially. Gave me Saturdays to catch up on work without feeling guilty. But the games got bigger, meaner. The men he invited weren't just coworkers anymore. They were connected guys, powerful in that small city way where everyone important knows everyone else. And they all had the same view of women, useful for certain things, but not quite human. Judge Robert Morrison was the worst. 63 years old, appointed to the bench 20 years ago, untouchable in our county. He divorced 3 wives, each one younger than the last, each one leaving with nothing despite his considerable wealth. He had a way of looking at me like I was furniture, something Brad owned that he was evaluating. Officer Danny Reeves and his partner Kyle Brennan were Brad's protection. Anytime Brad drank too much, drove too fast, got in a fight, Danny and Kyle made it disappear. In exchange, Brad did free work on their houses, and they got to play in the big boys poker game, rubbing shoulders with the judge and councilman. If you're watching this from somewhere safe, where your partner treats you as an equal, be grateful. But if you recognize this world, this gradual erosion of your humanity, this transformation from person to property, then subscribe. I need you to know you're not alone. And drop a comment with your city, not your name, just your city. Sometimes knowing others are out there, surviving the same thing, is what keeps you going. The transformation from Brad's wife to Brad's property happened in stages, so slowly I almost didn't notice. Like gaining weight 1 pound at a time until suddenly your clothes don't fit. Year 6 started with him suggesting I dress differently. Nothing dramatic, just comments. That skirt's a bit short for a married woman. Do you really need to wear heels that high? Maybe something less attention-seeking for the company dinner. I started changing, thinking I was compromising, not realizing I was shrinking. Then came the financial control. Brad wanted to review our accounts together every Sunday. It made sense, I thought. Transparency in marriage. But it became him questioning every purchase I made while his spending went unexamined. Why did I need a new laptop for work? Couldn't I use the old one another year? Meanwhile, he bought a $40,000 truck we couldn't afford, saying it was necessary for his image at work. The isolation was masterful. He'd pick fights right before I was supposed to meet friends. Create emergencies when my book club meets. I had migraines when my assistant invited us to dinner. Slowly, my world got smaller. The friends stopped calling. The invitations stopped coming. By year 7, my life was work and home, Nothing else. But the poker games were where I really saw who Brad had become. Or maybe who he'd always been. The way he'd snap his fingers at me to get attention. The jokes about training your wife like a dog, rewards for good behavior, punishment for bad. The other men laughed, sharing their own tactics. Judge Morrison talking about his ex-wives like they were failed employees he'd had to fire. 3 months before the kick, there was an incident. I'd been in the garage bringing drinks when Tony Castellano, different Tony from Brad's construction crew, this one owned 3 car dealerships, grabbed me. Not violently, but possessively. Hand on my ass, pulling me onto his lap, saying something about Brad sharing his toys. I'd frozen, waiting for Brad to intervene. Instead, he'd laughed. Said I wasn't that kind of toy, but Tony could dream. I'd walked out, locked myself in the bathroom, and thrown up. Not from disgust, but from realization. I wasn't a person to these men. I was Brad's property, and the only reason they didn't touch me more was because Brad hadn't given permission. Yet, 2 weeks before the kick, Judge Morrison made Brad an offer. He was starting a new development company and needed investors. If Brad could put in $100,000, he'd triple his money within 2 years. Brad didn't have $100,000. But I did, in the business account for Sullivan Financial. Brad told me to transfer it and said it was an investment in our future. I refused. First time I'd said no to him in 2 years. The fight was terrible. He didn't hit me, hadn't crossed that line yet, but he punched walls, threw things, screamed until the neighbors called the cops. Danny Reeves showed up, of course. Talked Brad down, told me to be more understanding, that men needed to feel like providers. Suggested maybe I should reconsider the investment. The threat was subtle but clear. At the next poker game, I heard them talking about me. Brad said I was getting too independent, too difficult. Judge Morrison suggested there were ways to handle difficult wives. Legal ways. Psychiatric holds. Competency hearings. Assets frozen for evaluation. All it took was the right paperwork, the right witnesses. The other men murmured agreement, sharing stories of women they'd known who'd needed similar correction. I started documenting everything after that. Every conversation, every threat, every poker game. I bought tiny cameras off Amazon, hid them in the garage. Downloaded an app that recorded phone calls. Started backing up everything to a cloud account Brad didn't know about. I wasn't planning revenge yet. I was just trying to protect myself, create evidence in case I needed it. But I also started moving money. Small amounts, nothing noticeable. Opening accounts Brad didn't know about. Talking to divorce lawyers in Denver, where Brad's connections didn't reach. Learning about Colorado's domestic violence laws, financial abuse statutes, RICO applications for criminal conspiracy. The morning of the kick, Brad had been sweet. Made me breakfast, kissed me goodbye, said he loved me. Classic cycle of abuse, tension, explosion, honeymoon. I'd started to relax, thinking maybe the investment fight had blown over. Maybe we could work through this. Then I made the mistake of asking them to keep the noise down during my client call. Such a small thing. But in front of his friends, it was a challenge to his authority. And Brad couldn't let that stand. Not in front of the men whose respect he craved more than his wife's safety. The garage was Brad's domain. He'd spent $30,000 renovating it into what he called his man cave. Professional poker table, full bar, 70-inch TV mounted on the wall, leather chairs that cost more than most people's rent. The walls were covered with sports memorabilia and photos from his high school football days, when he was somebody special instead of just another guy with a hard hat and a beer gut starting to show. That Saturday, October 15th, the game started at noon as always. I'd made sandwiches. Brad liked to show off my cooking to his friends. Italian subs with homemade bread, his mother's recipe I'd learned to keep him happy. Set them on the granite counter Brad had installed, the one that cost $8,000 we didn't have. The client call was at 3 p.m. Morrison Technologies, potential contract worth $200,000 to my firm. I'd been preparing for weeks. I'd told Brad about it multiple times, had it on the calendar, and reminded him that morning. He nodded, said he'd keep the guys quiet. By 2:45, they were drunk and loud. Screaming at the TV where some college game was playing, Music blasting from the sound system, Tony telling some story about a stripper in Vegas. I texted Brad, asked him to lower the volume. He ignored it. Texted again. Nothing. At 2:55, I had no choice. I walked out to the garage in my professional clothes, white blouse, black skirt, the outfit I wore for video calls. The room went quiet when I entered. 11 pairs of eyes turned to look at me like I'd violated sacred space. Brad, I need you to keep it down for the next hour. I have that important call, remember? The silence stretched. Brad's face went through several expressions: embarrassment, anger, calculation. Then Tony Castellano spoke up, loud enough for everyone to hear. Whipped already, Hutchinson? She got your balls in her purse? The other men chuckled. Judge Morrison leaned back in his chair, watching Brad like this was a test. Danny Reeves already had his phone out, sensing something worth recording. Brad stood up slowly. All 6'3" of him, wearing his Broncos jersey, the one I'd bought him for Christmas. He walked toward me, and I thought he was going to walk me back inside, maybe apologize quietly. I actually felt bad for embarrassing him. Instead, he stopped 3 feet away and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. I told you not to interrupt poker night. You said you'd keep it quiet for my call, I responded, still thinking this was a negotiation. Did I? He turned to his friends. Did I say that, boys? They shook their heads, grinning. Danny's phone was definitely recording now. Brad, please. This call is important. He moved so fast I didn't have time to step back. His right foot came up, the work boot was still on, and connected with my left side. Not a push, a kick. The kind you'd use on a door that wouldn't open. The force lifted me slightly, sent me backward. I hit the garage floor hard, my hip taking most of the impact, motor oil from some project soaking immediately through my clothes. The pain was instant and sharp, but the shock was worse. In 7 years, he'd never hit me. Thrown things, yes. Punched walls, yes. But never touched me in violence. The line he'd finally crossed seemed to glow in the air between us. Then they laughed. All of them. Judge Morrison actually applauded slowly, like Brad had done something impressive. Tony whistled. Danny kept filming, moving to get a better angle of me on the ground. Brad looked down at me, and his expression was the worst part. No remorse. No surprise at himself. Just satisfaction. Like he'd been wanting to do this for years and finally had the excuse. Get up, Margot. And bring us more beer while you're at it. The expensive stuff this time. I got to my feet slowly. My side screamed, my hip throbbed, oil covered my entire left side. I looked at each of them. Really looked. These pillars of our community. Judge Morrison, who decided custody cases and domestic violence sentences. Officers Reeves and Brennan, who responded to domestic calls. Councilman Rick Patterson and Jim Thorne, who voted on funding for women's shelters. Business owners who employed hundreds of people, probably women in situations just like mine. None of them looked away. None of them looked ashamed. They were enjoying this. I walked inside, changed clothes because I couldn't do a video call covered in motor oil. Put on a different white blouse, trying not to cry from the pain of lifting my arm. Sat at my desk, did the call, landed the contract. My voice never shook. 20 years of foster care training, never let them see you break. After the call, I got them their beer. The expensive Belgian stuff Brad bought to impress, but didn't even like. Walked back out to that garage, served each man with a smile. Brad grabbed my wrist when I served him, pulled me close, whispered in my ear. Good girl. Maybe you can learn after all. I smiled at him. Kissed his cheek, playing the submissive wife they all expected. Went back inside and started the timer on the camera app I'd installed 6 weeks earlier. The whole thing was recorded from 3 angles. The kick, the laughter, Danny's filming, all of it. I uploaded everything to my cloud account, then made 2 more backups. Sent one to an email account Brad didn't know existed. Sent another to my assistant with instructions not to open unless something happened to me. Then I sat in my office, door locked, and started planning. Not just how to leave Brad, that was simple now. But how to destroy the entire network that made him feel safe enough to kick me. How to take down every man who laughed. How to dismantle the structure that protected them. It would take 3 months. 3 months of playing the perfect submissive wife while I gathered evidence, built cases, and planted the seeds of their destruction. 3 months of serving beer and sandwiches to men who thought I was broken, never knowing I was documenting every crime they casually discussed, every confession they made thinking I wasn't really listening. Brad's kick didn't break me. It freed me. Because once someone crosses that line, once they show you exactly who they are, you don't owe them anything anymore. Not loyalty, not discretion, not protection. They become fair game. And I was very, very good at hunting. That night, after the poker game ended at 1 a.m., Brad came to bed proud of himself. Pulled me close despite my flinching from the pain, whispered that he was sorry but I'd embarrassed him. Had to maintain respect, he said. I'd understand when I learned my place. Then he fell asleep, snoring within minutes, arm heavy across my bruised ribs. I lay there until 3 a.m., then carefully extracted myself and went to my office. Locked the door, pulled up the footage from the garage cameras. I watched myself get kicked from 3 angles. I watched these powerful men laugh. I watched Danny zoom in on my face as I struggled to get up. The rage was so pure it felt like ice water in my veins. But rage without purpose just burns you up. I needed a strategy. I started with research. Deep dives into each man at that poker table. Public records, social media, business filings, court documents. I knew how to do this. It was part of my job, following money trails, understanding corporate structures. But now I was looking for something different. Crimes. Vulnerabilities. Pressure points. Judge Morrison was easy. 3 divorced wives meant 3 women with stories. I found his second ex-wife, Linda Morrison, living in Wyoming. Called her from a burner phone, said I was a journalist investigating judicial misconduct. She laughed bitterly and said I'd need a bigger notebook. Sent me documents she'd kept, evidence of bribes, fixed cases, hidden offshore accounts. She'd tried to report him during their divorce, but nobody would listen to a bitter ex-wife. Danny Reeves and Kyle Brennan were dirty cops, but smart about it. Never took direct bribes, just favors. Free work from Brad, free cars from Tony's dealership, free meals from restaurants they protected. But Danny had a weakness. He recorded everything. Not just my humiliation, but their entire friendship, their crimes, their confessions. His cloud storage was a goldmine, and his password was his badge number. It took me 5 tries to crack it. The councilmen were embezzling city funds through the construction contracts they steered to friends. Rick Patterson had a gambling problem, owed money to the kind of people who break legs. Jim Thorne was having an affair with a 17-year-old intern, though he thought she was 19. She wasn't. I had screenshots of their texts, his dick pics sent to a minor. Tony Castellano was running a money laundering operation through his dealerships. Cash businesses, easy to clean dirty money through inflated car sales. I found the patterns in the paperwork, transactions that didn't make sense unless you knew what to look for. 20 years of financial crimes, enough for federal charges. The business owners were all connected, all dirty in their own ways. Tax fraud, wage theft, safety violations covered up by bribes to inspectors. The kind of crimes that seem small individually but add up to RICO when you prove conspiracy. And Brad. My husband had been skimming from every construction job for 5 years. Charging clients for materials never delivered, work never completed. His boss didn't know, but Judge Morrison did. He was getting a cut for steering contracts Brad's way. There was also the assault, captured on camera. In Colorado, domestic violence in front of witnesses was a felony, especially when those witnesses were law enforcement who failed to report it. I spent 2 weeks just gathering information, barely sleeping, fueled by rage and coffee. Brad noticed I was quieter but thought his kick had worked, that I was learning my place. Started making more demands. Iron his shirts a certain way. Have dinner ready exactly at 6. Stand behind his chair during poker games like a servant. I complied with everything. Became the perfect submissive wife they all expected. And they got comfortable. Started talking more freely around me, forgetting I existed except when they needed something. Judge Morrison discussed his bribes openly. Danny showed videos of people he'd brutalized during arrests. The councilmen planned their embezzlement thinking I was too stupid to understand. My grandmother once told me something when I was 16, after another foster family had sent me back. She said, "Margot, people will underestimate you because you're a woman, because you're damaged, because you're alone. Let them. Their blindness is your advantage. The moment they stop seeing you as a threat is the moment you become dangerous." She'd been a secretary in the 1960s, the only woman in an office of men who treated her like furniture. But she listened to everything, documented everything. When they tried to fire her for getting pregnant, she had enough dirt to destroy the entire company. They paid her a settlement that bought her house, put my mother through college, set up the fund that eventually paid for my education after foster care. 3 weeks after the kick, I knew everything. Every crime, every weakness, every secret. But information is just potential energy. I needed to convert it to kinetic energy, and for that, I needed help. The decision to destroy them all came at Thanksgiving. Brad had insisted we host his family. 23 people in our house, me cooking for 3 days straight while nursing bruised ribs that hadn't fully healed. Brad held court, telling stories about work, about his important friends, about how well he'd trained his wife. His brothers laughed. His father clapped him on the back, saying he'd done well for himself. During dinner, Brad's phone rang. Judge Morrison, drunk despite it being 2 p.m. Brad put him on speaker, showing off his powerful connections. The judge was rambling about some cases, then said something that changed everything. "Remember that woman, Brad? The one who wouldn't sell her house for the development? Problem solved. Had her committed for evaluation. Amazing what a concerned judge can do. She'll be in the psychiatric ward for at least 72 hours, probably longer. Long enough for her son to get power of attorney, sell the house." Brad laughed. His family laughed. I stood in my kitchen, holding a turkey platter, listening to them laugh about destroying a woman's life for profit. That's when I knew I wouldn't just leave. I'd burn it all down. I started with allies. Linda Morrison, the judge's ex-wife, was eager to help. She had more documents, recordings she'd made during their marriage. We met at a truck stop halfway between Fort Collins and Cheyenne, 2 women sharing stories of powerful men who'd tried to break us. Next was Rebecca Chin, Tony Castellano's ex-business partner. He'd forced her out 5 years ago, stolen her share of the dealership. She had records of the early money laundering before Tony got sophisticated about it. She also had connections at the FBI. Her new husband was an agent in the Financial Crimes Division. The 17-year-old intern Jim Thorne was sexting turned out to be 16, and her father was a sheriff in another county. When I anonymously sent him screenshots of their conversations, he didn't go through Fort Collins police. He went straight to the state attorney general. I created encrypted email accounts, anonymous tip lines to journalists, and secure drops for documents. Started feeding information slowly, carefully, making sure nothing could be traced back to me. The Denver Post got documents about the embezzlement. The FBI received packages about Tony's money laundering. The state police got videos of Danny and Kyle's brutality. But I needed more than anonymous tips. I needed a smoking gun, something that would connect all of them, prove conspiracy. And Brad's poker games were the perfect opportunity. I upgraded the cameras in the garage, added audio recording equipment hidden in the ceiling fans. Every Saturday, I captured hours of them discussing crimes, planning new ones, laughing about the people they'd hurt. Judge Morrison explaining how to fix cases. The councilmen detailing their embezzlement. Danny and Kyle describe how they covered up crimes for friends. The breakthrough came in week 6. They were drunk, celebrating some deal, and Tony suggested they formalize their arrangement. Create an actual organization with rules and revenue sharing. Judge Morrison loved it and started drafting bylaws right there at the poker table. They were literally creating a criminal conspiracy on camera in my garage while I served them beer and sandwiches. Brad was so proud to be included, to be part of something important. Never noticed that I'd started serving them with a smile that was a little too bright. Never noticed that I'd stopped flinching when he raised his hand. Never noticed that I'd started making copies of his financial records, his phones, his computers. I also started protecting myself. moved half our savings to an account Brad didn't know about, got a storage unit, started moving important documents and valuables there, consulted with 3 divorce attorneys, had papers drawn up and ready, created a go bag with cash, clothes, copies of all the evidence. The final piece was protection. I knew that when this exploded, these men would be dangerous. Desperate men with nothing to lose. So I reached out to someone I'd never thought I'd contact again, Marcus Rivera, my foster brother from my last placement. Marcus had gone a different direction than me, becoming what he called a security consultant. What he really meant was he ran protection for people who needed it. Not mob stuff, but close enough. "Marcus, I need your help," I said when we met at a coffee shop in Denver. He looked at me, at the way I held myself carefully from the still healing bruise, and his face went dark. "Who do I need to hurt?" "Everyone," I told him. "But not with fists. With paper." The first setback came when Brad found one of the cameras. It was a Saturday morning, 3 hours before poker night. He was in the garage setting up, knocked over a box on the shelf, and the camera I'd hidden there fell out. It was small, the size of a button, but he knew what it was immediately. He came into the house holding it like evidence, face purple with rage. I was in the kitchen, making sandwich prep. I had just enough time to hit the record on my phone before he reached me. "What the fuck is this, Margot?" I played confused, then scared. "I don't know." "What is it?" He grabbed my arm, hard enough to leave fingerprints. "Don't lie to me. This is a camera. Are you recording me?" My mind raced. Denial would make him tear the house apart looking for others. So I went with partial truth. "I was scared," I said, letting tears come. "After what happened, after you kicked me, I wanted protection. Evidence if something worse happened." His grip tightened. "Nothing happened. You fell. You're clumsy. Everyone saw you fall." I nodded quickly. "You're right. I'm sorry. I was just scared. It's the only one, I swear." He studied my face, looking for lies. Then he threw the camera against the wall, shattering it. "If I find another one, if I find out you're recording anything, you'll wish a kick was all you got. Understand?" I understood. But he didn't find the other cameras, the ones built into smoke detectors, hidden in picture frames, embedded in the poker table itself. He'd found the decoy, the one I'd placed obviously enough to be discovered if he looked. The real surveillance system kept running. The second setback was worse. Judge Morrison got suspicious about the leaks. Too many of his cases were being reviewed, too many questions being asked. He had connections everywhere and started making calls. Found out someone had been talking to his ex-wife. He confronted me at the next poker game. Not directly, he was too smart for that. But he sat at the table, staring at me while I served drinks, and told a story about a woman who'd tried to destroy him once. How she'd ended up in a psychiatric facility, diagnosed with paranoid delusions. How sad it was when wives became mentally unstable, started making false accusations. How the court system had ways of dealing with such women. Brad laughed along, but shot me a warning look. Later that night, he grabbed my face, forced me to look at him. "Whatever you're thinking about doing, stop. These are powerful men. They can make you disappear. Not kill you, make you disappear into a mental hospital where you'll be so drugged you won't remember your own name. Is that what you want?" I shook my head, terrified. But inside, I realized I was running out of time. They were getting suspicious, paranoid. If I didn't act soon, they'd act first. The third setback nearly destroyed everything. My assistant, Janet, accidentally mentioned to a client that I'd been documenting something big. The client was friends with Rick Patterson, the councilman. Word got back to the poker group within hours. That Saturday, the atmosphere was different. They were testing me, asking leading questions, and watching for reactions. Danny Reeves kept showing videos on his phone of women who'd crossed the wrong people. Tony told stories about witnesses who'd recanted testimony after gentle persuasion. Judge Morrison discussed involuntary commitment procedures in detail. Brad was sweating nervous. After they left, he cornered me in the bedroom. "They know something. I don't know what you've done, but they know. You need to fix this, or we're both dead. Not divorced, dead. These men don't play games." I convinced him I had no idea what they were talking about. Played the confused, frightened wife. Suggested maybe someone else was investigating them, maybe they had other enemies. Brad wanted to believe it, needed to believe it. But I could see doubt in his eyes. I had to accelerate the timeline. Started uploading everything to multiple secure servers, creating dead man switches that would release everything if something happened to me. I reached out to Marcus, told him I needed protection starting immediately. Marcus sent 2 of his guys to watch the house. Former military, the kind of men who could disappear into the background but appear instantly if needed. It cost me $5,000 a week, but it was worth it when I noticed strange cars following me, when our home phone got calls with just breathing, when Brad started receiving texts telling him to control his wife. The stress was killing me. Literally. Lost 20 pounds in 2 months, developed an ulcer, started having panic attacks. But I couldn't stop. I was so close. Had enough evidence to destroy them all, just needed the right moment to release it. Then Brad gave me the perfect opportunity. He announced they were having a special poker game. A celebration. Judge Morrison had just fixed a major case, saved Tony millions in a lawsuit. They were all going to be there, all drinking, all ready to celebrate their invincibility. Brad grabbed my chin that morning, forced me to look at him. "You're going to be perfect tonight. Serve drinks, serve food, stay silent. Show them you're not a threat. Show them you know your place. Our lives depend on it." I nodded, submissive. But I knew this was it. The last poker game. The night I'd destroy them all. The final poker game was December 18th. I remember because it was my foster mother's birthday, the only good one I'd had, who died when I was 14. Felt like she was watching, approving. I spent the morning preparing like a general before battle. Checked all recording equipment, made sure backup batteries were installed. Uploaded everything to 3 separate cloud services, set automated emails to journalists, FBI, state police, scheduled to send at midnight unless I stopped them. Gave Marcus's team the green light to be ready. Then I made sandwiches. Brad's favorite Italian subs, fresh bread, expensive meats. Arranged them on platters like I was catering a wedding. Set up the bar with top-shelf liquor, the kind that made men feel important while loosening their tongues. Everything perfect, exactly how they expected. The men arrived starting at noon. Judge Morrison first, already drunk from some lunch celebration. Then the councilmen, the business owners, Danny and Kyle in their off-duty clothes, but carrying their service weapons. Tony arrived last, in his Maserati, cocaine residue still visible on his nose. Brad was nervous, but trying to hide it. Kept shooting me looks, reminding me to behave. I was the perfect hostess, invisible until needed, silent, efficient. Refilled drinks before they asked, brought food without being told, cleaned up messes immediately. They relaxed, started to believe I'd learned my place. By 3 p.m., they were deep into their celebration. Judge Morrison was explaining how he'd fixed Tony's case, manipulated evidence, threatened witnesses. The whole thing was recorded in crystal clear audio. Tony was so grateful he pulled out a bag of cash, started distributing bundles to everyone. Payment for services rendered, he called it. Bribes caught on 3 different cameras. Rick Patterson, the councilman with the gambling problem, was desperate. Started begging for a larger cut, said his bookie was going to break his legs. The others laughed at him, threw chips at him like he was a beggar. Jim Thorne showed pictures on his phone, new photos of his teenage intern, pictures that would add 10 years to his sentence. Danny Reeves was the worst. Started showing videos of arrests he'd made, people he'd beaten who'd tried to file complaints. One video showed a woman who'd called 911 on her husband. Danny had arrested her instead, after the husband slipped him $500. The woman was sobbing, begging, while Danny laughed and called her dramatic. Brad started relaxing as the afternoon went on. His friends were happy, drunk, and not suspicious anymore. He'd even smiled at me when I brought him a fresh beer, the first genuine smile in months. Like we were a team again, like the kick had been erased by my submission. At 6 p.m., they took a dinner break. I served steaks I'd been marinating for 2 days, loaded baked potatoes, and Caesar salad. They ate like kings, toasting their success, their power, their untouchability. Judge Morrison stood up, drunk enough to sway, and made a speech about their brotherhood. how they protected each other, elevated each other, how they were the real power in Fort Collins. Not the mayor, not the police chief, but them, men who understood how the world really worked. Then he looked at me, standing by the door with an empty tray, and said something that sealed his fate. "See, boys, Brad understands. Women like her, they need structure. They need to know their place." That kick he gave her? Best thing that could have happened. Look how well behaved she is now. Like a properly trained dog. They all laughed. Brad loudest of all. I smiled and nodded, playing the broken woman they wanted to see. Then I went inside and made a phone call. Rebecca Chin, Tony's ex-partner, was waiting for my signal. Her FBI husband had a team ready, waiting for probable cause. I told her about the cash on the table, the cocaine in Tony's car, the videos Danny was showing. Enough for a warrant, enough to move immediately. Linda Morrison was also ready. She'd been in contact with the Judicial Review Board and had a meeting scheduled for Monday. But I told her to release everything now and send it to every news outlet in Colorado. The judge's career would be over by morning. The teenage girl's father, the sheriff, was parked 3 blocks away with state police. I texted him a single word, "Now." Marcus and his team moved into position around the house. Not to hurt anyone, just to make sure nobody left until law enforcement arrived. At 7:30 p.m., I went back to the garage with dessert. Homemade tiramisu, Brad's mother's recipe. They were so drunk they could barely focus, but they cheered when they saw it. I served each man personally, making sure to look them in the eye, to smile. I wanted them to remember this moment, the last moment they felt powerful. At 7:45 p.m., Brad's phone rang. His boss, screaming about FBI agents at the office, seizing computers. Brad went pale, stood up too fast, knocked over his beer. The other men's phones started ringing too. Lawyers, employees, family members all calling with panic in their voices. At 7:50 p.m., they heard the sirens. At 7:55 p.m., the FBI kicked in our front door. The garage erupted in chaos. Tony tried to run, hit Marcus's guy at the back door, got taken down hard. Danny and Kyle reached for their weapons, got tasered before their hands touched the guns. The councilman sat frozen, Rick Patterson actually pissing himself. Judge Morrison tried to pull rank, shouting about jurisdiction and proper procedure, until an agent showed him the federal warrant with his name on it. Brad looked at me, and I'll never forget his expression. Confusion, rage, fear, and finally understanding. "You did this," he said, not a question. I smiled. The same smile I'd given him after every kick, every insult, every humiliation. "No, Brad. You did this. I just documented it." The arrests were beautiful in their precision. Judge Morrison went first. The FBI had been investigating him for years, but could never get enough evidence. My recordings gave them everything: bribes, case-fixing, conspiracy, racketeering. He tried to maintain his dignity as they cuffed him, still threatening lawsuits, still believing his power meant something. It didn't. The agents had already frozen his accounts, seized his properties. His third wife had been served divorce papers an hour earlier, along with every document Linda had provided showing his hidden assets. Tony Castellano tried to bargain immediately. Started naming names, offering information, not knowing I'd already given the FBI everything. The cocaine in his car elevated the charges to federal trafficking. The money laundering through his dealerships meant RICO charges. 25 to life, the agent told him. Tony started crying, this big man who'd grabbed me, who'd joked about me being Brad's toy, sobbing like a child. The councilmen were arrested on embezzlement and corruption charges. But Jim Thorne got the worst of it. The state police had a separate warrant for him. Sexual exploitation of a minor, possession of child pornography, using government resources to facilitate abuse. The sheriff's father was there specifically to arrest him and made sure the cuffs were extra tight. Rick Patterson had a heart attack right there in our garage and had to be taken to the hospital before booking. Danny and Kyle faced the longest list of charges. Police brutality, evidence tampering, accepting bribes, failure to report domestic violence, conspiracy to violate civil rights. Every video Danny had proudly showed was evidence against him. Every crime he'd covered up was documented. The state attorney general had sent their best prosecutors, the ones who specialized in corrupt cops. Danny's phone, the one he'd used to record my humiliation, became evidence against him. But Brad's arrest was personal. I'd asked the lead FBI agent, Special Agent Sarah Chin, no relation to Tony, if I could be the one to explain his charges. She understood, had seen the bruises in the photos, and watched the video of the kick. She gave me 5 minutes. Brad was sitting on our couch, hands cuffed behind his back, still in his poker clothes. The Broncos jersey I'd bought him. I sat across from him, in the chair he'd never let me use. His chair, the good one. 7 years, Brad. 7 years I loved you. Supported you. Built a life with you. And you kicked me like a dog in front of your friends because I asked you to be quiet for a phone call. He started to speak, but I held up my hand. I know about the plan to steal my inheritance. Have all the emails between you and Morrison about declaring me mentally incompetent. I know about the woman in psychiatric hold, the one whose house you wanted. She's been released, by the way. Her son was arrested an hour ago for fraud. His face went white. But here's the best part, Brad. Remember that prenup Morrison drew up? The one that would give you access to my money? I had my lawyer add a clause. Tiny print you didn't read. If you're convicted of any crime against me, you owe me damages equal to twice your net worth. Your truck, your tools, your share of the construction company, even your precious poker table. It's all mine now. Agent Chin stepped forward then, started reading the charges. Domestic violence, assault, conspiracy to commit fraud, theft, tax evasion from his skimming, intimidation of a witness. Federal and state charges, consecutive sentences. He'd be lucky to get out in 15 years. As they let him out, Brad turned to look at me one last time. Why? He asked. You were happy. We were happy. No, Brad. You were happy. I was surviving. There's a difference. The garage was a crime scene now wrapped in yellow tape. 11 men's lives were destroyed in one night, all because they'd laughed when Brad kicked me. But I wasn't done. The next morning, Sunday, every major news outlet in Colorado had the full story. Documents, recordings, videos, everything except the domestic violence footage, which I kept for the trial. Judge Morrison's corruption going back 20 years. The councilman's embezzlement. Tony's money laundering. Danny and Kyle's brutality. Brad and Morrison's plan to steal my inheritance. The headlines were devastating. Judge fixed cases for poker buddies. Councilman stole millions from city. Cops covered up crimes for cash. But the one that meant the most to me, local woman brings down corruption ring after domestic assault. Brad's family called me, begging, threatening, pleading. His mother screamed that I'd destroyed her baby boy. His father offered me money to recant. His brothers promised various forms of retribution. I recorded every call, sent them to the FBI. More charges for witness intimidation. Tony's wife filed for divorce Monday morning, took the kids and whatever money wasn't frozen. The dealerships were seized, investigated, and shut down. 20 employees lost their jobs, but 5 came forward with their own stories of Tony's abuse and wage theft. They'd been too scared to speak up before. Judge Morrison's cases started getting overturned. Hundreds of them, going back years. People he'd wrongfully convicted were released. Families he'd destroyed in custody battles got new hearings. His second wife, Linda, gave an interview to 60 Minutes about surviving judicial abuse. She became an advocate for reform, turning her pain into purpose. The teenage girl Jim Thorne had groomed testified before the state legislature about adults who prey on interns. 3 new laws were passed protecting minors in government positions. Her father, the sheriff, made sure Thorne was placed in the general population at the state prison. He lasted 2 days before requesting protective custody. Danny and Kyle's victims started coming forward. Dozens of them, people who'd been brutalized, falsely arrested, extorted. The department had to pay out millions in settlements. Both cops were put in solitary for their own protection. Cops who'd betrayed the badge didn't do well in prison. 3 months after the arrests, I sat in my new apartment in Denver. Smaller than the house Brad and I had shared, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture chosen by me, every wall color is my decision. No poker table, no sports memorabilia, no shrines to high school glory days. The divorce had been quick, hard to contest when you're in federal prison. I got everything, not that there was much left after the lawyers. Sold the house, the garage where it all happened. Some young couple bought it, excited about the renovated garage. I didn't tell them what had happened there. Some ghosts deserve to stay buried. My accounting firm thrived after the story broke. Turns out, being known as the woman who exposed massive financial fraud was good for business. Clients trusted me to find what others missed. I hired 3 new employees, all women who'd left bad situations. We had an unspoken understanding, a shared vigilance. Marcus still had his guys check on me occasionally. Not obviously, just enough to make sure Brad's brothers weren't following through on their threats. They'd tried once, showing up at my office, making noise. Marcus's team had a conversation with them. They didn't come back. The trials were exhausting. Testifying over and over, reliving that kick, explaining the recordings. Brad's lawyer tried to claim entrapment, saying I'd manipulated him into committing crimes. The prosecutor laughed, showed the jury the video of Brad kicking me. No manipulation needed, just his true self revealed. Brad is 18 years old. Would have been less, but he'd threatened me in recorded jail calls, tried to hire someone to hurt me. His stupidity added 5 years to his sentence. He'd be 56 when he got out if he survived. His high school quarterback physique wouldn't help him where he was going. Judge Morrison got 25 to life. The federal charges were devastating, but what really killed him was losing his reputation. He'd been somebody important, respected, feared. Now he was just another corrupt official, disgraced and disbarred. His wife divorced him, took everything that wasn't seized. He died in prison 2 years later. Heart attack, they said. I didn't mourn. Tony Castellano flipped on everyone, became a federal witness. Still got 15 years, but in minimum security. His testimony helped convict dozens of others in his network. His ex-partner Rebecca sent me a card, thanking me for finishing what she'd started. We had lunch sometimes, 2 women who'd fought back and won. The councilmen both pled guilty, got 10 years each. Their families disappeared from Fort Collins society, moved away in shame. The city council passed new oversight laws, financial transparency requirements. Named them after me, which I asked them not to do. I didn't want my name on anything. I just wanted justice. Danny and Kyle got the worst of it in prison. Cops who'd betrayed their badges, who'd hurt innocent people, who'd covered for abusers. Danny was stabbed twice in his first year. Kyle requested transfer to a mental health facility, claiming PTSD. Both would serve at least 20 years. I'd won. Completely, thoroughly, devastatingly won. But victory felt hollow sometimes. Late at night, I'd wake up feeling that boot in my ribs, hearing that laughter. Some wounds don't heal just because you've wounded others in return. I started therapy with someone who specialized in domestic violence survivors. Dr. Patricia Reeves, no relation to Danny, helped me understand that revenge and healing weren't the same thing. That destroying Brad and his friends was justice, but rebuilding myself was the real work. Slowly, I started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee, dinner, testing whether I could trust again. Some dates ended when they recognized me from the news, either too interested in the drama or too frightened by what I'd done. That was fine. I wasn't looking for someone to complete me anymore. I was already complete. My foster brother Marcus and I grew closer. He protected me when I needed it, no questions asked. We had Thanksgiving together that year, 2 foster kids who'd survived different hells. He raised a toast to women who fought back. I raised one to men who know when to step up and when to step back. Brad wrote me 1 letter from prison. Not an apology, he wasn't capable of that. Just a single line, "You were never who I thought you were." He was right. I wasn't the weak, damaged woman he'd thought he could control. I wasn't the victim he could kick without consequence. I was someone far more dangerous, a survivor who'd learned to fight back, who'd spent 7 years studying her enemy, who'd waited for the perfect moment to strike. There's a photo from the trials that ended up in the Denver Post. I'm walking out of the courthouse after Brad's sentencing, wearing a simple black suit, my head high. Someone had shouted a question about whether I felt vindicated. The photo caught me mid-turn, a small smile on my face. Not triumphant, just satisfied. That photo sits on my desk now, next to one of my grandmother's. Two women who refused to be victims, who understood that sometimes the only way out is through, and sometimes through means burning everything down. People ask if I regret destroying so many lives. 11 men arrested, families destroyed, careers ended, decades of prison time. The ripple effects touched hundreds of people, employees, spouses, children who had to live with their father's crimes. But I didn't destroy those lives. Brad did when he kicked me. His friends laughed when they laughed. They did when they chose corruption over integrity, abuse over respect, crime over law. I just documented it. I just refused to be their victim in silence. The kick was meant to break me, to show me my place, to prove Brad's power in front of his powerful friends. Instead, it freed me. Freed me from the delusion that our marriage could be saved. Freed me from protecting him from consequences. Freed me from being the good wife who kept quiet about the bad husband. Sometimes I drive past the old house, see that young couple living their life, parking their cars in that garage. I wonder if they ever feel the ghosts, the echo of that laughter, the shadow of violence. But then I remember, those aren't their ghosts. They're mine. And I've made peace with them. Brad will be out in 15 years if he behaves. He'll be in his 50s, no money, no friends, no reputation. His construction skills will be outdated. His connections will be dead or in prison. He'll have to start over, the way I did after foster care, except without the strength that comes from surviving young. He'll probably violate parole, go back in. Men like Brad don't learn, they just find new victims or self-destruct. I still have the recording of the kick. Sometimes, when I doubt myself, when I wonder if I went too far, I listen to it. Not to the impact, but to the laughter after. 11 successful men, pillars of the community, laughing at a woman being physically assaulted by her husband. That laughter justified everything that came after. My business is thriving. I specialize now in forensic accounting for domestic violence survivors going through divorces. Help them find hidden assets, prove financial abuse, build cases for full custody. Pro bono for the ones who can't afford it. It's my way of turning poison into medicine. Marcus jokes that I should teach a class, how to destroy your abuser completely and legally. But that's not what this was about. It wasn't about destroying Brad. It was about refusing to be destroyed. It was about showing that powerful men aren't as powerful as they think when their victim keeps receipts. The assistant who accidentally leaked information, Janet, still works for me. Promoted her twice. She says that mistake was the best thing that ever happened, forced me to act before they could. Sometimes the universe pushes you off the cliff so you remember you can fly. I'm 37 now. 3 years past that kick, that laughter, that garage floor. I don't flinch anymore when men raise their voices. Don't apologize for taking up space. Don't make myself smaller to make others comfortable. Brad kicked those habits out of me, though not in the way he intended. There's no happy ending here, no riding off into the sunset. Trauma doesn't work that way. Some nights I still dream about that garage, still feel that boot, still hear that laughter. But I also dream about their faces when the FBI arrives. About Brad's expression when he realized I'd orchestrated it all. About Judge Morrison in handcuffs, powerless for the first time in his life. If you're listening to this from a place of fear, from a relationship where you're walking on eggshells, where violence hovers just beneath the surface, know this. Document everything. Every threat, every incident, every witness. Build your case in secret. Find your allies carefully. And when you strike, strike completely. But also know this, revenge won't heal you. It will satisfy something primal, balance the scales, and serve justice. But healing is different work, quieter work, harder work. Revenge is the surgery that removes the tumor. Healing is the slow recovery after. Brad thought he was teaching me my place that day in the garage. He was. He just didn't realize my place was standing over the ruins of everything he'd built, holding the match I'd used to burn it down. My grandmother would have been proud. Not of the revenge itself, but of the patience. of the thoroughness, of the refusal to be broken by breaking men. She'd have said what she always said when I was young and angry about unfairness. The best revenge is a life well lived, but sometimes you need to clear the land before you can build. I cleared the land. Now I'm building. If this story found you, if you recognize yourself in it, subscribe. Share where you're watching from. You're not alone, even if it feels that way. And remember, they laugh because they think you're powerless. Prove them wrong. I'm Margot Sullivan. I took my name back. This was my story. And to Brad, if you're somehow watching this from federal prison, that kick was the best thing you ever did for me. It woke me up. It set me free. It showed me exactly who you were and exactly who I could become. 11 men laughed that day. None of them are laughing now.